Hello friends, as you know, we've been running this series on modern drama which focuses on the European experience in the 20th century, and today's the speaker with us, the scholar with us is Professor Payal Nagpal, who teaches English in Janki Devi Memorial College, Delhi University. And when it came to Jean Genet, the playwright that she is speaking on, then I knew that only Professor Payal Nagpal to do justice to this play and this writer. And I say this with confidence that arguably she is the most knowledgeable person on Jean Genet in the university. She has done her research on Jean Genet and she is an expert, and her opinion is going to be a most authentic opinion on this playwright and the play. Now, there is one thing that I would like to comment on in the beginning itself, and I would seek her opinion on what I say, is that is there a connection between the writer and his work? Sometimes the writer may not have the kind of social reputation that writers have. A writer is supposed to be a conscience keeper of the society of his time, and people like the romantic poets Shelley, etc., would say that poets are the legislators of humankind, and since it's a writer who is very sensitive, and yet he had a background which people would have questioned, even though Professor Payal Nagpal, I'm sure, will not question, because she will be judging the writer by what he says, what he prefers, what he comments on, and that is in fact the most valuable. But then let's confirm this opinion with Professor Payal Nagpal. Please tell us about this author, and then you can discuss the work.
Thank you so much, Professor Prakash, for your kind words. And to address the question that you have raised, I think there couldn't be a more pertinent way of beginning with a discussion about Jean Genet and his works, because this is a question that any researcher, any reader of Jean Genet's work would have to confront, because his life is not the kind of life that falls within the normative paradigm, being a thief at that point of time, being gay, and he openly accepted his sexuality. So it became very, very problematic for critics to, really speaking, understand his work. But as you rightly pointed out, that I think that gave him an insight into social spaces and experiences that were not available otherwise, and that is very clearly reflected in his plays. And in fact, there is a movement that one can see in his works, and from his prose writings to the plays to his short pieces later. So this kind of a movement also tells us how he as writer is also drawing from social experiences. Now, his experiences in terms of social space, that space lies outside the normative, social structure. And that is his strength. He makes available, I think, to the reader an entirely new understanding of the society. And as somebody who has worked on Jean Genet's plays, I think, one needs to understand his work, his writing, on the strength of this experience, and he should certainly not be understood entirely in terms of his personal life. I think that would be, though of course, as I said, that it is an issue that one has to confront more so with Jean Genet than maybe with any other playwright or writer of that particular period. But it's interesting to see, I think it's important to read about his life, but at the same time to understand how is it that his plays work and how do they function in society. I think that is a very important point.
So in a way you are suggesting that a writer generally lives two lives, and this is particularly true about this writer, the life in society and the life in literature. When he writes, he is in front of his own imagined experience, his imagined characters, and then he is a different person than one was maybe outside the domain of writing.
Yes, in fact, at times the writer's personal experience might be entirely different as compared to what he's really writing about. And to entirely situate oneself in a kind of biographical understanding would become very, very, difficult. It would actually be a stumbling block, really speaking, if we were to be fair enough and to look at the work that is a product also of its time and not just of the writer's imagination. It's shaped by the times, so it belongs out there in the society in that domain.
And in any case, biographical writing will not do. Because what is there is the text, the writing, the emphases that exist, taken of course, picked up from society, but then they are turned into a kind of artistic, aesthetic experience, and then they have a world of their own.
Oh, absolutely. That is true, and in fact, there is a little bit here is a photograph of Jean Genet. It's a much later one of 1983. Now, since we've raised the question of Genet and his personal life, so just one or two things that one can really speaking point out, and which is of course the dates. He was born in 1910 and lived pretty much just till the other day, 1986. His mother was named Camille. There's very little that's known about her. She was a seamstress and abandoned him. The reason that one is bringing this to the forefront is because this sense of being kind of left out is something that he always had, and a very famous episode that's often recounted when one speaks about Genet is, how he actually spoke about this to Hubert Fish in an interview. When asked to describe the house he lived in, now because the mother left him after 6 months or so he was then put in the public welfare system, and he had foster parents. So when he was asked to describe the house he lived in, he described the house of his foster parents, and the other children made fun of him because they felt that this was not really speaking his house. So this again kind of drew the child's attention to his self, in terms of what can be called a solitary status. His association, with family or with home in that sense was severed, and that is something that he never really wanted to kind of revive. And again, what is often looked at in terms of Genet's life is also how the hegemonic male figure is an absence in his personal life, and that is what actually I think becomes really speaking his strength. So living across in the country, using the railways, stealing, that's how he grew up, spent time in the prison also. So but this being severed, really speaking, in terms of his own realization and imagination from that entity called home, he says, after that I could only feel at home among people oppressed by color or factions in revolt against whites. He says, maybe I'm a black who's white or pink, but still black. I don't know my family. And this particular statement is actually borne out in his work. The fact that he could not, and he had complete, not only did he completely reject the stable institutions of the society, be it family, be it school, be it the bonds that this kind of society created. He completely not only rejected them, but was completely disgusted by the normative institutions. So which is why he chose to lead the life of a thief. His realization of his sexuality, he became a poet quite early in life, and in his phase in the reform prison, and from there to the penitential prison where he had to perform hard labor. He was sent to prison in Maitre. So in this early phase he wrote long prose works, and I must add they're very, very difficult to unpack, because works like Our Lady of the Flowers, Miracle of the Rose, the autobiographical The Thief's Journal, but at the same time his writing enamored writers like Jean Cocteau, and they greatly admired his writing. Sartre, who actually wrote a full book on Jean Genet, called Saint Genet, Actor and Martyr. So Genet, in that sense, he became quite popular in both, Cocteau circle as well as that of Sartre. And, Cocteau was hugely responsible for ensuring that he is pardoned and his term, in the prison ends. And it was primarily on the strength of his writing. So, where Genet exercised choice in terms of rejecting society's ways, out of this came Sartre's book, Saint Genet, Actor and Martyr. Now, this was actually a very problematic phase because, on the one hand, it gave something to Genet, which was sainthood. He called the book Saint Genet. But Genet was not comfortable with this because what he valued was his position, I must say, not on the margins, but pretty much outside the margins. And so, his plays are also located in areas that are, not even marginal entities. They are pretty much spaces that exist outside of the society. So his novels and prose writings from the first phase is actually followed by a decade of, writing plays. And finally, what one can call one can call his activist phase, where he remains in support of the Black Panther group. He speaks for the cause of the Palestinians. So if we look at the decade to which his plays belong, it's primarily the 1950s. So Death Watch was written in 1949, The Maids in 1953, The Balcony 1957, The Blacks 1960, and his magnum opus The Screens in 1961. Apart from this, Genet, of course, as mentioned, wrote his extensive prose works and what one can call novels or pretty much anti-novels in a certain way, poetry, plays, and of course writings of his conviction about the cause of the Palestinians, for instance. So, if you look at his plays, the play this is from the play titled The Maids. I mean, if you just look at the different titles also, now Death Watch, which is situated in the prison, The Maids, which has just 3 characters, is situated in a regular bourgeois household. The Balcony, located in the brothel. The Blacks presents a courtroom scene, and where it deals with the whole issue of color. And there is the play The Screens, which is on the French occupation of Algeria. So here I would ask Professor Prakash about what he thinks about this kind of a very difficult and problematic sort of life that Genet led, and that he also converted in a sense, on the personal front to a matter of choice, and how this actually reflects in his choice of characters, in his choice of spaces that he, draws from to create the world of his plays. I mean, the kind of insights that he gives us into, society, the world of his times, it's actually way ahead of the time period in which he was writing. So, an important aspect of his plays is that of role playing. So, his characters, as one can see, these people are people on the margins or outside it. So, in The Maids, the play centers on the experience of 2 women who work as maids in a household, and there is a madam who's not there. So the play begins, and I've always felt that at the first go it would be difficult to even make out exactly what is happening. It is with such conviction that these roles are being performed. So Claire plays the role of the madam, and Solange plays the role of Claire. And the situation is inverted because now the maid is playing the role of the madam of the house. So the situation is now inverted, and we are looking at everything from the point of view of the women who are playing the social role of the maid in the house. And it is from their point of view that the role of the madam is assessed, the role of the maid is assessed. So this intermeshing of roles, this role playing in a sense, is done in such a way that the social role of the maid or the social role of the madam is itself put up for discussion. So, what we see in front of us is a maid speaking about the madam as she's performing that particular role. And it is this kind of a world that Genet presents to his readers and audience. So the characters, of course, realize their own limitations. The society has imposed these limitations on them. And so at one point Claire says, "And I contain within me both vengeance and the maid, and give them a chance for life, a chance for salvation." So this is, Claire who's performing the role of Madam. And she says that she carries within her both. And she addresses Solange, who's playing the role of Claire. "Claire, it's a burden. It's terribly painful to be a mistress, to contain all the springs of hatred, to be the dunghill on which you grow." So as one can see, the language is, always very intense and extremely, there's extreme passion in the language, and does not spare anyone. So for instance, to be the dunghill on which you grow itself is something that's, about the madam, and how it is painful to be the mistress, and the maid is, Claire is not comfortable playing that role, and yet at the same time the entire disgust that is experienced about this position of privilege of being the madam is conveyed through the role of the maid. And the play does not move towards a resolution of any sort, but it is this experience of showing what exactly, how exactly people who are at the absolute bottom of the pyramid are looking at all this. So this process of inversion through role playing is something that we see in all his plays. It's something that I think in terms of craft, Genet only becomes, it's rather simple here in The Maids, but as one moves from The Maids to another play called The Balcony, and of course to The Blacks, it's just something that evolves and matures. So the question to be asked then is, what really is the reason for this kind of, almost a kind of circularity, like, you end where you begin from. So what really is Genet stating about the stage and life? So Sartre would say that he is attracted to falsehood on stage. And to quote Sartre on this, with practice, Jean Genet has managed to transmit to his thought an increasingly rapid circular movement. He has a vision of an infinitely rapid rotation which merges the poles of appearance and reality, which means at all times we are looking at two frames of reference. One is the world of appearances and one is the real world. Now, what is more real is a question that Genet asks throughout his plays. And he uses this, similarly, just as he uses role play to put up these roles for discussion. He does not accept these roles unthinkingly. He does not accept the equation that the society gives, but rather he inverts it, and he pretty much, one can say, throws it back at the society to ask what this is all about. And again, here I'd request Professor Prakash to share his views on, something like role play could be very simplistic. Again, appearance and reality would seem to be a very, very, almost today a jaded sort of concept. But it works in such a way in Genet's world of theatre that it allows a lot of discussion and to think about these roles, I think, in spaces that are not available otherwise.
No, I think role playing is a very profound concept in the sense, that you are detaching yourself, the person is detaching oneself from the role that one is playing. And the role is generally shaped by the society of the time. It imposes the role on you. It asks you to behave as a woman, it asks you to behave as a person, it asks you to behave as a leader, it asks you to behave as a commentator. So one is not oneself, and one is in fact playing a role which might be imposed from outside. So I think so far as the complex social reality, its oppression, its exploitation, its strength and weakness, that comes out quite well through the role playing, and no character or writer etc. would take the responsibility, because they would say it's a role that one was playing. So it opens out, in fact, into the domain of creativity and experimentation.
Yes.
And more experimental and more creative the art is, the more it attracts the attention of the larger audience, not merely in France. Within France, not merely the whites, but also blacks, and outside in French colonies, it will have a different interpretation. So the scope is widened of the writing when role playing is taken as the determining factor in the characters.
And in fact, as mentioned, that with each play, the craft also seems to evolve, even though, the term role playing might appear to be very simplistic, but the craft, evolves. So, what really speaking is Genet saying about these figures who are there in the society? These are roles that emerge from the society. How is it that Genet is picking up these, using the method of role play, reworking it? Because I think one of the most important points about all his plays is that they are located in a space that is generally not the conventional space. Like, even if we look at The Maids, it is a play that's in a sense located in a bourgeois household. But there's also talk about, the maid's garret, spaces where they remain. These are also brought to the forefront. But in a sense, the space to which the madam belongs is, broken down. It's, metaphorically, that is. And it is done through this performance, really speaking, of, Claire pretending to be madam and Solange pretending to be Claire. So, this, and this is what Sartre, in his assessment of Jean Genet, of course, apart from the fact of sainthood, he analyzes this and understands this use of appearance and reality, calls it a kind of whirligig that's going on in, Genet's plays. So, when we move on from this, if we actually look at this particular screenshot, we see the performance, how the actor is looking into the mirror. And this actually brings us to a discussion of another very, very important play by Jean Genet, which is The Balcony. And in this idea of, be it the stage setting, be it the performances of the actors, the characters who are selected, the point, the location of the play itself, everything is done in a manner that is very, very different from the way in which one would envisage, plays were written at that time. So, I think in this context, The Balcony, takes on role play to very, very interesting dimensions. So,
friends, in this part of the discussion, Professor Payal Nagpal has traced some of the features of the writing of Jean Genet, and of course he starts as a fiction writer, he also is a poet, and then he takes to drama, and these different areas of imagination would be intersecting in his drama, which came slightly later. And role playing is a concept that is to be kept in mind, and it takes reality to a different plane altogether, where the person is not sharing his or her experiences with you, but is playing a role, and to an audience where everybody is supposed to be leading a kind of unreal life and playing a role. So I think in the following discussion, the second part of the discussion, the same thing will be tested, in the waters of the main play that Professor Payal Nagpal is going to discuss, that is The Balcony, written, as she said, in 1957. Thank you.